I remember that day like it was yesterday. My sister's wedding was supposed to be a happy occasion, a celebration of love and family. Everyone was dressed in their best, laughter was filling the room, and the air smelled of joy and excitement. But for me that day quickly turned into a nightmare. My dad, someone I had always looked up to, humiliated me in front of every single person. His words cut through me like a knife, sharp and unexpected, leaving me frozen, unable to respond. I could feel the stares of relatives, friends, and strangers burning into me, their eyes full of judgment. My confidence, my pride, everything I had built for myself seemed to crumble in those few moments. It was crushing to see someone who was supposed to protect and love me openly belittle me. 2 months passed after that day, and I tried to bury the memory, tried to act like it didn't affect me. I went about my life, putting on a brave face for everyone around me. But deep inside, the humiliation lingered, and the hurt refused to fade. Then, one ordinary afternoon, my phone started ringing nonstop. It was as if the universe had decided it was time for my side of the story to be heard. I picked up the first call, and what unfolded next completely changed everything. The people who had witnessed that terrible day, the ones who had laughed or ignored me, suddenly reached out to apologize, to ask questions, to understand what had really happened. The truth I had been holding inside for months now had a voice, and it shook everyone to their core. I realized that humiliation, though powerful in the moment, cannot withstand patience, resilience, and truth. This experience taught me something profound about family, respect, and self-worth. Humiliation can break you temporarily, but it does not define you unless you let it. Facing the aftermath, owning my story, and standing firm in who I am gave me a sense of empowerment I had never known before. I understood that sometimes people lash out not because of you, but because of their own insecurities. What shocked everyone that day wasn't just the truth I shared. It was the strength I displayed in the face of embarrassment. Now whenever I look back, I don't feel anger anymore, not in the way I did before. I feel clarity. I feel strength. I learned that moments of public humiliation can become turning points if you refuse to let them break you. And what happened after that phone call, the unexpected calls, the apologies, the support, it was a lesson in patience, courage, and the undeniable power of standing up for yourself even when the world seemed against you. I can still remember the moment with painful clarity, as if it happened just yesterday. It was my sister's wedding, a day that should have been filled with joy, laughter, and celebration. The house was alive with energy, relatives chatting excitedly, children running around, and the smell of food and flowers creating an atmosphere that felt almost magical. Everyone was smiling, dressed in their finest clothes, and there was this collective sense of happiness that usually comes when a family comes together to celebrate a moment as important as a wedding. I had been looking forward to this day for months, imagining the smiles, the warmth, and the love that would surround my sister as she stepped into a new chapter of her life. But what I hadn't imagined, what I could never have prepared for, was the humiliation that would come from the very person I trusted the most, my father. It started subtly at first, a comment meant perhaps as a joke, but layered with an unmistakable sharpness. My dad said something about me, mocking a trait I had always been self-conscious about, and I felt my chest tighten instantly. The room went quiet for a brief second. the kind of silence that carries tension and makes every word feel heavier than it actually is. Then, instead of stopping, he continued, and the words became sharper, cutting through the air like daggers. I could hear laughter in the background, some awkward, some outright cruel, and I realized with a sinking feeling that the people around me were enjoying the spectacle. Every word he said seemed designed to embarrass me, to expose me in a way that left no room for dignity or defense. I felt my face burning, my stomach twisting into knots, and my hands trembled slightly as I tried to maintain composure. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, with a tone of authority, as if I had done something unforgivable, as if everyone had been waiting for him to correct me in front of the entire gathering. The worst part was seeing the reactions of people I knew, friends, family, and extended relatives, all of them witnessing my humiliation, some hiding their smiles behind polite expressions, others openly snickering. Every stare felt like a physical blow. The laughter, the murmurs, the sideways glances, it all combined into this overwhelming sense of exposure, leaving me feeling small, vulnerable, and completely powerless. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the floor, to be anywhere but there. What made it even more devastating was the sense of betrayal. My father had been my protector for my entire life, the person I had trusted to support me, to guide me, to stand by me in moments of weakness. And yet, in front of everyone, he chose to belittle me instead of shielding me, to amplify my insecurities instead of comforting me. In that moment, I realized that humiliation is not just about embarrassment. It's about the shock of having someone you love and trust intentionally undermine your sense of self in a space where your dignity should have been respected. I could feel a storm of emotions raging inside me: anger, confusion, shame, and an almost paralyzing sadness. I didn't know how to respond. Should I yell? Should I cry? Should I run away? None of it seemed possible. I felt trapped in a situation where every option seemed inadequate. Every potential reaction just another layer for him to mock. Even after the words were said and the moment passed, I could feel the echoes of that humiliation lingering, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head, noticing every detail, every expression, every whispered laugh. It wasn't just the embarrassment in front of strangers. It was the emotional scar left by someone whose opinion had mattered more than anyone else's. The impact of that day didn't fade quickly. It stayed with me, creeping into my thoughts, gnawing at my confidence, and making me question my worth. That single afternoon, which should have been full of love and celebration, became a defining moment of vulnerability and pain. I realized then how deeply humiliation can wound, not just in the moment, but in the days, weeks, and months that follow, echoing in your mind and shaping the way you see yourself and the people around you. After that day at my sister's wedding, life didn't just go back to normal. The humiliation I had endured lingered, like a shadow following me everywhere I went. For days, I tried to act as though nothing had happened, putting on a brave face for family, friends, and colleagues. I smiled, laughed, and participated in conversations as if the weight of that day wasn't pressing down on me. But inside, it felt like I was trapped in a constant storm of emotions. Every memory of my father's words came back vividly, as if they had been etched into my mind with fire. I found myself replaying the scene repeatedly, noticing every detail I hadn't focused on before. The smirk on his face, the way his tone carried authority, the slight pauses he took to let the words hit harder. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that maybe I was overreacting, that perhaps he hadn't meant to humiliate me intentionally. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was a sense of betrayal that I couldn't ignore, a sharp, lingering pain that no rationalization could erase. I would catch myself in the middle of mundane tasks, and suddenly my thoughts would drift back to that moment. A simple sound, like laughter in a crowded room, would trigger the memory, and my chest would tighten involuntarily. The internal struggle wasn't just about anger or sadness. It was about trying to reconcile the image of the father I thought I knew with the man who had embarrassed me in front of everyone. During those 2 months, I oscillated between feeling powerless and trying to regain some sense of control. Some days I felt a quiet determination to rise above the humiliation, to prove to myself that my worth wasn't defined by that one terrible afternoon. I focused on my work, on personal goals, anything that could distract me and rebuild the confidence that had been shaken. Yet, no matter what I did, the memory returned, insistent and unforgiving. I realized that internal struggle isn't about ignoring pain. It's about living with it, understanding it, and figuring out how to move forward despite it. I also began to examine my relationship with my father in a way I never had before. I asked myself questions I had avoided for years. Why did he feel the need to assert control through humiliation? Was this a pattern, a reflection of his own insecurities, or just a one-time lapse of judgment? Wrestling with these questions became part of my internal journey, a way of making sense of something that had seemed senseless at first. I understood that healing doesn't come from immediate confrontation or revenge. It comes from patience, introspection, and gradually reclaiming your sense of self. The 2 months that followed the wedding were a period of quiet resilience, where I learned to sit with the discomfort, process the shock, and prepare for a moment when I could confront the aftermath with strength rather than fear. 2 months after that devastating day, I was slowly adjusting to life as if the memory of humiliation was something I had to carry quietly in my chest. I had begun to find small ways to regain control over my life, focusing on work, hobbies, and the people who genuinely cared about me. Then, one afternoon, my phone began to ring. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another routine call, maybe a telemarketer or someone asking for something trivial. But the calls didn't stop. One after another, the ringing seemed almost insistent, demanding attention. Finally, I picked up, curiosity mixed with a twinge of apprehension. The voice on the other end surprised me immediately. It was someone who had been at the wedding, someone who had witnessed my father's humiliation firsthand. They spoke cautiously at first, almost nervously, apologizing for not understanding what had really happened that day. They confessed that they had assumed I had deserved some of it, or that it was a harmless joke. But after reflecting on the situation, they realized the depth of the pain I had endured. More calls came after that, each one echoing similar sentiments. Relatives, distant family friends, even acquaintances reached out to express support, apologize for their earlier laughter, and ask if I was truly okay. It was surreal. Suddenly, the embarrassment that had felt so permanent began to shift, transformed by recognition and understanding. For the first time since that day, I felt seen in a way I hadn't before. The people who had once ignored me or laughed at my discomfort were now acknowledging the reality of what had happened. The power dynamic that had been so heavily in my father's favor suddenly started to even out. Their calls weren't just apologies, they were validation, recognition that the humiliation had been undeserved, and that I hadn't been at fault. It was a turning point, a moment when the lingering shame began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I realized that while the humiliation had been painful, it hadn't defined me. The willingness of others to acknowledge the truth gave me a platform to reclaim my voice and my dignity. That chain of calls taught me that sometimes the aftermath of pain comes from unexpected places. Strength doesn't always appear in the moment of confrontation. Sometimes it appears quietly, days or months later, when the world begins to see your truth. It was in that moment, answering call after call, hearing words of understanding and support, that I finally felt a shift, an internal confirmation that what had happened, as painful as it was, could be transformed into growth, clarity, and an unexpected sense of respect. After all that had happened, the humiliation at my sister's wedding, the silent struggle over the following 2 months, and the unexpected phone calls that validated my pain, I began to understand a deeper truth about resilience and self-worth. I realized that life doesn't always hand you justice immediately, and sometimes the people who hurt you the most can leave wounds that linger far longer than anyone expects. But what I also learned is that no one can take away your dignity unless you allow them to. The process of facing adversity, enduring humiliation, and navigating the emotional aftermath became a crucible, forging a stronger version of myself. I began to see that true empowerment isn't about revenge or retaliation. It's about reclaiming control over your own story and refusing to let someone else define your worth. I started to view my father's actions not just as a personal attack, but as a reflection of his own flaws and insecurities. Understanding this didn't erase the pain, but it helped me separate my identity from the humiliation I had endured. My self-worth wasn't diminished by someone else's words or behavior. It was something I had to affirm and protect for myself. Each day I consciously reminded myself that I am more than the embarrassment I faced, more than the judgment of others, and that my value is inherent, not conditional on approval or recognition. This journey taught me patience as well. Healing and empowerment don't happen instantly. They unfold gradually through reflection, self-compassion, and resilience. I learned to embrace my emotions instead of suppressing them, to confront the truth of my experience instead of pretending it didn't matter, and to allow the lessons to shape me into a more confident and grounded person. In moments of doubt, I remembered the phone calls, the validation, the understanding, the support, and I realized that even after pain, there is growth, clarity, and sometimes even unexpected respect from those around you. Ultimately, the experience became a turning point in how I approached life and relationships. I understood that adversity is inevitable, but how you respond to it defines your character. Humiliation may feel like it strips you of power in the moment, but resilience allows you to reclaim it. The embarrassment that once held me captive became a reminder of my strength, a proof that even in moments of vulnerability, I could rise above, stand firm, and assert my worth. By facing the aftermath with courage, I discovered that empowerment doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from enduring it and emerging stronger on the other side.